Australian geologist Phil Smart. In this brief presentation, I'm going to introduce you to some of the wonders of the Great Barrier Reef. It's actually the largest organic structure on Earth. We'll be sailing right past, and we'll even be stopping off at the reef. So far we've talked about Fraser Island and the Sand Islands, that's World Heritage, and this is another one, the wet tropics inside the coast. You'll have an opportunity at both Airlie Beach and Cairns of going up into the lush rainforest and seeing spectacular waterfalls. Or alternatively, you can head out to sea and visit the wonders of the Great Barrier Reef. It's an amazing size. The marine park covers nearly 350,000 square kilometres. To put that in terms you might relate to, the United Kingdom, all of the countries in the United Kingdom, add on Switzerland, add on Holland, and that is still not as big as the Great Barrier Reef. Its length is about 2,300 kilometres. And how big is the second reef in the world? Well, it's in the Caribbean, it's the Belize Reef, and it's out about 290 kilometres long. And we have the third biggest in Australia. Over in Western Australia, the Ningaloo Reef is 280 kilometres long. They're all spectacular reefs, but the standout is the Great Barrier Reef. Let's have a look at reef corals in general. Coral reefs are widely distributed across the planet, as shown by those green boxes. So what controls them? One of the main features is these coral reefs, in order to grow, need surface water temperatures of at least 20 degrees centigrade. And that means that most corals are going to be found between 30 degrees north and 30 degrees south. But tropical reefs, the ones that are really spectacular with their growth and variety, they need water temperatures greater than 24 degrees. Let's have a look at the Great Barrier Reef from space. Here it is up here, and you can see it looks like a continuous structure heading right down to southeast Queensland from up in Torres Strait, 2,300 kilometres. But in reality, it is actually a series of discrete reefs and islands that come down the coast. This is only one section of it. When we go to Airlie Beach, you'll have an opportunity to see some of the variety that the reef presents. The continental islands in here, the Whitsunday group, are actually part of the continent, but reef corals have formed fringe reefs around them, and they are spectacular. If you go further out, you can cross the lagoon, the Great Barrier Reef Lagoon, and you come into the inner reef corals. And if you're more daring, you could head right out to the edge of the continental shelf and do some snorkelling and diving on the outer reef. This is a bathymetric picture which shows you the depth of the water, the depth to the base, and so you can see that coral can grow in shallow depths in the red and yellow. At this point here, the reef is something like 60 or so kilometres wide, but in other places it's up to 250 kilometres wide. It depends on the width of the continental shelf. The reef can best be described as a maze of about 3,000 reefs. 760 of them are fringing reefs that go around the borders of islands and the mainland. It also includes a variety of islands, sand cays and other islands, continental islands, etc., 900 of them in total. And of course, if you head out to the outer reef down here, you will see that it drops off straight away into the continental slope and then to the ocean abysses. So the reef extends right out to the edge of that slope. Our next port of call after Airlie Beach is Cairns, and this will give you an opportunity not only to head up here into the wet tropics to see the waterfalls and rainforest, but you could also go out again and have another look at the Great Barrier Reef. You've got continental islands, inner reef islands and outer reef islands. And this is the sort of thing you'll see on those trips out to the reef. I can't promise you the turtle. He doesn't come on call. Okay, let's think about how this all started. Well, it all began with that southern great continent, the supercontinent called Gondwana, which was breaking up gradually. And this was one of the last pieces to break off. So up in North Queensland, you'll find that it broke away there and moved away to form a plateau offshore. That drifting started 60 million years ago, but it ceased 10 million years later, 50 million years ago. Once it drifted away to form that plateau, it started to sink. And it did so rapidly that corals that can only live in shallow water could not build their reefs fast enough. So most of that plateau was barren. It was only a few high points where the reef started to develop. Here's a bathymetric picture today of that area. There's your Queensland Plateau up the top there. The colours on a bathymetric chart, I think I mentioned, the reds are very shallow, the yellows are still good coral growing depths, and then you get down into the greens and blues and the deep blues and purples that are far too deep. So here's the Queensland Plateau, and you can see the reefs on it in yellow and red. And here's the continental shelf that was left behind, and it behaved a bit differently. It didn't sink as fast, so these ancient reefs grew on the continental shelf. And because it subsided much slower, the reefs were able to keep pace. This meant that the growth was much more substantial. The temperature and depth conditions suited the coral reefs, and so another factor too, because you've got rivers coming down to the coast, those rivers carry sediment. It's the tropics. Rainfall up here is not measured in inches, it's measured in metres. And those rivers carry sediment down. That sediment is actually used by the coral polyps to build up a reef substrate. They build on it. And the reefs in that area average 200 metres high, 200 metres thick. Okay, let's see how this reef has developed since then. I can only show you the early stages. We don't have time for a full story, but Antarctica and Australia were the two last bits of this southern supercontinent, and they started to drift apart from 50 million years ago. Australia began drifting at about 7 centimetres per annum, heading into warmer waters. And you can see here the gap widening between Antarctica and Australia. Australia is moving further north by 25 million years ago. And the first start of the real reef began. There it is, way up in North Queensland at the top end of the Barrier Reef. Let's have a look at present day. We are still causing havoc with places like Indonesia, causing tsunamis and earthquakes and so on, because we're crashing into them. But here we have the Australia moving north into tropical waters, and so the water is warm enough for tropical corals to develop right down the Queensland coast. If you were to come back here in a few 100,000 years or perhaps a million, you would probably find coral reefs opposite Sydney Harbour. You'd have the Harbour Bridge, the Opera House and the Great Barrier Reef. Thank you.